My question is, why would shuttle astronauts request this improvement to the EVA gloves when the EVA gloves allegedly worked so well in gripping tiny objects on previous missions, such as STS-61 or Apollo 15, in which David Scott was apparently able to grip a feather despite wearing the inferior gloves?
Well, in my left hand I have a feather, in my right hand a hammer.
The gloves were built that they couldn't grip anything smaller than about an inch. They had very bad feeling on the fingertips.
We know that this particular shuttle flight ascended into an altitude high enough to encounter the anomaly. And knowing that a mere 30 minutes within the anomaly is enough to fry the Hubble, how long can we expect the astronauts to last in it? As NASA had admitted in the wake of NOAA 720, a spacesuit would offer little resistance. And we know that astronauts and cosmonauts aboard Mir, which never went anywhere near the anomaly, saw flashes of light due to cosmic rays penetrating the spacecraft. Therefore, the shuttle's shielding would have offered little resistance against even greater levels of radiation found within the anomaly and the Van Allen belts.
Hubble goes through it every 7 orbits. They have to shut it down, have to shut some of the instruments down because of the increased radiation.
If it takes as little as 30 minutes to fry the Hubble, could this be the motive behind faking the EVA videos of STS-61? Interestingly, it probably wouldn't have taken 30 minutes to do the job. As Plate states in his book,
"Your home computer may be faster than the one on board the Hubble Space Telescope, but it would last perhaps 15 seconds in space before turning into a heap of useless metal."
The dawn of the new millennium saw the completion of Bart Sabrell's and David Percy's respective documentaries. The following year, Fox released a special entitled Conspiracy Theory: Did We Land on the Moon? A year later, Sir Patrick Moore responded with the April 2002 edition of his television series, The Sky at Night.
Happy Spanner out there. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Good evening. I'm sure you recognize those pictures. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepping out onto the surface of the moon from Apollo 11 in 1969. You need to know, about 30 years later, amazingly, there are still some people who genuinely believe that that never happened. The entire thing was faked by NASA. And we'll deal with that this evening.
Radiation was one of the subjects discussed.
Now, from now on, Douglas, I'm going to act as devil's advocate.
All right.
I'm a conspiracy supporter. So, first of all, just what would have been killed by radiation as soon as they went above the atmosphere.
Well, they would have been in extreme danger if there had been a major solar flare or coronal mass ejection, Patrick, when they were outside the Earth's atmosphere and so on. But that didn't fortunately occur. The evidence is subsequently that they received doses which were quite within the predicted bounds. 2 points I think can be made about this. There is a thing called the South Atlantic anomaly where the Van Allen radiation belts around the Earth come down quite low. Now, shuttle astronauts have been going through that since 1981 when the shuttle first flew without any apparent harm. Second point is, and people who have had their films X-rayed inadvertently when going abroad will realize this, film is very sensitive to radiation. Now, there is no doubt that the many, many pictures we've seen from near the moon if not necessarily on the moon, around the moon, vehicle to vehicle, etc. These show no signs of radiation whatsoever. And of course also the shuttle astronauts, again since the early 1980s, have been bringing back tens of thousands of images. They would have been subjected to radiation in the South Atlantic anomaly if it was going to have any effect. No evidence whatsoever.
Not once on that program did Sir Patrick tell his viewers what he told readers of his book, Exploring the Earth and Moon, written in 1991. Explorer 1 was launched on 1st of February 1958 and was put into an elliptical orbit which carried it from 360 to 2,250 kilometers above the ground, with an orbital period of 115 minutes. It was only 14 kilograms in weight, but it carried a Geiger counter, which is an instrument used to study particles and high-energy radiation, with the intention of counting the number of cosmic ray particles at various heights. To everyone's surprise, the cosmic ray count stopped suddenly when Explorer reached a height of 965 kilometers, and this happened every time the satellite went through the critical height. The situation was most peculiar, and at first the American team, headed by James Van Allen, simply did not know what to make of it. It was absurd to suppose that the region above 965 kilometers was free from cosmic rays. And there had to be another explanation. Before long, Van Allen realized the truth. There were so many particles that the Geiger counters in Explorer could not cope with them, and had become jammed. Sir Patrick clearly knows Van Allen's research to be true, and yet he has frequently and publicly dismissed the idea that the Apollo moon landings were faked.
It was impossible to go to the moon because of a thing called radiation in space. Now that's been the hardest thing to gather information about. I picked up the first clues from Van Allen's Scientific American. He put in an article about his work. This is James Van Allen, the discoverer of the Van Allen belts. And it was real clear and simple. One of the statements he made about that time was that space was a sea of deadly radiation. And how did he figure this out? Well, he was using things called raccoons, and he'd have a high altitude balloon take this rocket as high up as it could, and then he'd fire the rocket. And he was getting in outer space. Wanting to know more about it, one day they put a Geiger counter in as a payload. And they watched that Geiger counter go up, 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 and then fall flat dead. No more transmission. They figured the machine failed, so they sent the next one up with a Geiger counter. They did the same thing. So one of his assistants, I think it was, said to him, hey, look, why don't we take another Geiger counter and shield it with lead so that it starts to count where the first one seems to have failed at the end of the scale. Now remember, the first one passed through the red scale. What does the red scale indicate? You can't be there.
We have encountered a very high intensity of radiation, which is of the order of 1,000 times as intense as could be attributed to cosmic rays as ordinarily understood.
It scared the man, and that red scale is the end of the line that says, get the hell out of here right now, if not sooner. Well, the other one clicked. I never found out how far, but it clicked. I don't know if it hit the end of that scale, but it clicked. Which says that any amount of time you spend in there is deadly. Because that's what the red line says. Get out of here now. You don't fool around here for an hour. Go. Well, when you take off in the rocket and you're going to the moon, you spend at least 1 hour in the Van Allen shield, and 1 hour going and 1 hour coming back. Now, Captain James Lavelle, who I call in my book now Liar Lavelle, made 2 trips to and fro. Okay? Now, if it's kind of deadly you can't even make 1 trip, but he made 4. And when asked in a deposition how much total radiation he had, he said a half a rem. Okay? In a deposition on a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Henceforth, since I can prove different, I've called him Liar Lavelle in my book. I amended my book. Every time you see his name, it's Liar Lavelle. Actually, they were all liars, but he's about the worst.
as we have been able to establish from the research of James Van Allen of the University of Iowa and E. Kovalev of the USSR Ministry of Health, without any shielding, the doses would be anywhere from 312.5 rem to 11,666 rem per hour. With a thin lead shield, the radiation would still be as high as 100 rem per hour.